All right, Brian, we're back again. Uh, it's post league summit, so this is the first time that we've gotten a chance to talk a little bit about the league summit experience and that sort of thing. So I'm sure we're gonna want to get into that. But yesterday, you and I got to go to the last grit event. Out of this world was the theme. You came as a marine in space. It was really weird. I thought I told you no more marine themed uniforms, but in fact, your wife put together a perfect costume for you. What was it?
Thank you for giving Kathy the shout out, but the black hole to go with my all black bike and black helmet, and yeah, pretty much the black theme.
And your wife was the Milky Way with the milk mustache and everything. That that was pretty inspired as well. So that was awesome. But is this a way of saying that the only way you don't dress up as something that is Marine Corps related is if your wife makes the costume for you?
You leverage the talent you have in a relationship. Sean, so it's kind
I
of pretty much
see. I
yes.
see.
Yeah.
That that's a great segue into how to get the most out of people in your life and give them props and uplift them. I like that. That was very
Teamwork
good.
makes the dream work, and it's made our dream work for the past 26 years. So
That's awesome. I had a blast. I wasn't feeling 100%, but still, like, I how many student athletes were there?
I was just talking to Shell about this today. I think we capped out just over 50, our biggest preseason grid event so far. So 50 student athletes.
And that was looking like as we were driving, like we were passing through little rain showers on the way to Lake James, and kind of like, oh, like, I was like, are people gonna not come because it's raining? But man, when we got there, that like everybody was raring to go. Shell had hot chocolate bar going. It was incredible, and then all kinds of cool costumes. It was just, I don't know. I've been really enjoying every of the grid events that I've been able to go to this season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to mention not only did we have a ton of student athletes, but a ton of coaches from across the league. Some fantastic coaches. I got to hang out with Susie Smoyer from IC Imagine on the group ride. She did a fantastic job of leading those student athletes along the new trail. First time for me out of Lake James. What a great trail system out there. And yeah, all the girls are just having a fantastic time out there.
Yeah, we did a ride. I swept in a group that was led by Nona Workman from Pisgah Rage and a new coach, Sarah from, believe it was the Henderson Hellbenders. She was sweeping with me, and kind of she said she was having a good time, like kind of seeing little things that I was doing as a sweep because she's brand new. Like she and her husband are just moved here and kind of brand new to the league and everything. And so it was kind of cool to kind of show her little things that you do as sweep. Number one rule: never pass a kid. That's seems like that's like a baked in part of the sweep job description. But I've had numerous times when I've been on a ride and a sweep comes and I'm like, where's, and I have a student athlete and they're like, oh, they told me that they weren't feeling good and just to go on. And I'm like, no, that's not what you do. You stay with the kid. So it was good. We did a cool ride, rode on the Tendo loops at Lake James, which is not part of the trails that I normally ride. They're more the beginner oriented trails. And it's a little bit of a weird maze. There's a point where the trails are kind of going in four different directions, all at this one kind of crossroads intersection. It's real easy to get turned around there. But I ended up telling us to go the wrong way, but I quickly realized the right way and kind of got everybody turned around. And then we were all smooth sailing from there. But though we did the West Wimba loop, I believe, and that was a lot of fun. I haven't ridden out there in a long time, except for the barn burner this past October. But it is a very cool trail system that is kind of, I mean, it used to be whenever it would rain, it would get super slick and deadly. I've had my fair share of like pretty bad incidents out there after the rain, but it's gotten much better. It's gotten ridden in and things like that. So we were really surprised that we were going to get a chance to ride. And then once we did, we were like, oh, okay, the trail's gotten a lot better about handling a little bit of moisture.
Yeah, I was able to talk to Woody, the park ranger that was out there supporting us and providing some, vehicle safety for us. And he knew we had a lot of folks coming that weekend, and he did what he could to keep those trails open for us. So we appreciate all the support from the state park system. And I tell you what, Sean, just when you think Shell can't get any more creative with her scavenger hunts, you and I were space chickens.
We were
Like,
space chickens. It was
my goodness.
awesome. I think you posted some stuff on the league Instagram from it was the chicken POV of us chasing uh the essays around as they were trying to find astronauts and stars and space rocks. And I've come to learn working on these grit events now that Shell always has some sort of game, and she's always says the same thing. It's a really simple game. Let me tell you the rules. And then she tells me the rules. And about, I don't know, 10 minutes into the rules, I realize this is a really complicated game and I need to pay attention really carefully because I'm going to mess something up. And then once she's done, she's like, okay, it's really simple. It'll all work out. Whenever I explain it to everybody, it'll make sense. Just go out there and do it. And I'm always amazed that it is exactly as she describes it. It's very simple, but there's just lots and lots and lots of instructions on how not to mess it up as the adult running whatever section of the game you're running.
And you're exactly right. If anyone wants to know what Space Chicken is all about, just look on our Instagram page from yesterday, and you can get a point of view from Space Chicken for sure.
They make a great noise, by the way.
Pretty good. And I'll
It's
tell you what, John. We're all of what 4 days into the regular season here, right?
yeah,
The season has kicked off, and just looking at some of the social media, so many of our teams out there are getting kind of that first practice in across the state. So good to see from so many of our teams getting that first practice under their belt this weekend, and it looks like everyone's already off to a real good start.
yeah. Our team, we have our first fun ride with new and returning student athletes on the 17th. And then we'll take a little bit of a hiatus for Christmas break and then get back at it in the beginning of January and kind of get ready for adventures and races and all those good things as we get going. But one part of that that I just want to bring up and really remind our coaches of is that the deadline for student athlete registration has been moved up from what we had previously communicated. The reason for this is that our first race is actually 2 weeks earlier in the year than what we've previously had. So in order to make enough room for us to process all of the petitions for upgrade, as well as getting everybody their custom number plate and all that sort of thing. The last date for student athletes to register with the league is January 22nd. And that's also the last date for coaches to file petitions for exception for category placement for student athletes so that we can process all of that in a timely fashion and have those custom number plates ready to go before the first race. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't upgrade after that point. It just means that if you do file a petition for upgrade, that you will not have a custom number plate with your name on it. You'll just get a number plate that is appropriate for your category with the new number on it.
Thanks for mentioning that last part, Sean. I've had a few team directors, head coaches reach out to me and ask about the petitions they've already submitted. Hey, we've got them. We'll consider them the end of January. So once the 22 January deadline comes in, we'll get a couple folks together on the league staff here, consider all those petitions for the initial fleet ups, if you will. And so by the end of January, early February, all those student athletes will know their initial position for the first race. But yeah, thanks for reminding everyone of that.
And we do have I believe we have two loaner bikes left at this point. So if you have student athletes that you're wanting to look at potentially getting some loaner bikes for, reach out to me and we can have a conversation about what sizes we have available before you kind of go through that process of filing the paperwork for it. And that way we can say yay or nay that we do have that size available or we don't have that size available, kind of go from there. The sooner the better on that, because like I said, we only have two left.
Well, with that, Sean, do you mind if I give everyone a little bit of a recap on League Summit, and you and I can tag team that a little bit, just for the folks that weren't there? Would love to kind of describe what we talked about a little bit.
Yeah, I had one last thing that I just wanted to get across that was sort of PitZone related, sort
Yep.
of like the nuts and bolts of things. for coaches. And this is just a reminder, if you have a student athlete or a coach that needs to be moved from one team to another, please send that information to me and I'll be happy to move them. Please do not send them a new invitation. That doesn't transfer any of their pit zone information. So if you create a new invitation, I have to actually delete that, or not delete, but deactivate that profile and then move the one that exists already. So just communicate that with me. I get it moved over. A little bit of a friction point, I understand, but that's the only way that PitZone works, is for an admin to actually do the movement. I'm happy to do it. Doesn't take me much time at all, and I'll communicate back to you as soon as I've got it done. And with that being said, that's all of the nuts and bolts of PitZone. As awesome as, I mean, I could talk about PitZone really for days, to be perfectly honest, but I think we have a much better thing to talk about, and that is League Summit. So, Brian, hit us with your first time league director, League Summit experience.
Well, I know you can at least talk about PitZone for an hour and 20 minutes because that's what you did at Lead Summit. So, as much as we all like PitZone, it was just one of those great training events. Sean, I'll let you talk about that here in a couple minutes. Some of the training we went through, which the feedback I've gotten was pretty good from the head coaches, team directors, and the folks we had there at League Summit. But let me just give a quick recap for folks that weren't able to make it out there. One, thanks for everyone that did attend, make the drive out to Rocky Mount, North Carolina. A very good venue. Had a great trail ride. Thanks to Bill Stevens for organizing that Saturday afternoon for us. But I gave what was a kind of a state of the league brief, just where we are, kind of where we're headed, and let me give just a quick recap. And this is current information. It might be a few more registrants through the day, Sean. But what I saw in PitZone this morning, 64 teams in our league right now, 404 coaches in the league for right now, 707 student athletes. And that puts us a pace of where we were last year. And so I think we are going to eclipse that 800 plus riders we had for last season. Very much a growth model for us. And by my count, 22% female, which I think is a lot of credit to Shell and that grit program for bringing in the female student athletes. So I think that's another good positive sign just for health of the league. We had mentioned the loaner bikes, Sean, but I also want to share with everyone we've given almost $4,000 in scholarships to student athletes so far this year to get more kids on bikes, families that are just need a little financial help to get the kids out to their teams. And I'll use that as an opportunity just to mention we are in the midst of the Share the Ride campaign. Been pushing a lot out on social media. Just if you have friends or families that are inclined to give during this season of giving, Nike is a good organization to do it. And if you go to the landing page, you can select North Carolina and continue to fund some of these programs like scholarships and loaner bikes. Sean, you delivered one this weekend to a female student athlete at the Grit event. Thanks for doing that. I've got two. I'm taking to a team this week. Just a good way to get kids on bikes. Speaking of that, we have generally a balanced budget this year. We're a little bit in the red just in terms of purchasing a new league trailer, which is good. It's just a sign of league growth. We need more space. A lot of kudos to Ben Harbor for helping us work that new trailer and taking the stuff out of the old trailer. He's got two members, Joe and Annie, on his team that are serving as our equipment managers this season. Thanks to them, they're doing a great job accounting for all the equipment, and we'll put that old trailer up for sale pretty soon. That's kind of an announcement here on the podcast. A team that might be interested, please reach out to me, and I'll get you linked up and maybe consider getting that old league trailer of ours. Sean, with that, you want to talk a little bit about the training, and then I'll cover a couple more of the informational topics we covered at League Summit.
Yeah, sure. I think, we've put a shared folder of all of our presentations, and uh from my standpoint, so being a high school teacher, you're going to look at my slides and you're not going to be able to make heads or tails of them, because they're like I do in class. Like, my slides are a backdrop for things that I talk about. So I don't write everything down. I stick with the Guy Kawasaki rule, which is 10, 20, 30. So no more than 10 slides, no longer than 20 minutes, and no font point smaller than 30, because you take the average age of your audience and divide that in half, and that's your minimum font size. So I think there's a lot of information there for people to go through, and it's something that all of our coach supporters really put a lot of time and energy and effort into to try to make something that was really worthwhile to attend. I presented a few sessions on pit zones, kind of some of the ins and outs and pitfalls. And like you said, it turned into an hour and 20 minutes, which was not my intention. But we had so many questions and conversations because that pit zone it is a weird box of like I constantly learn how to do things. There was something that I've been doing manually for 3 seasons as a pit zone admin that right before he left, Michael Eastwood discovered how I was doing it. And he was like, no, man, you just hit this button and it downloads a report. And he was like, I thought you were doing that all along. So, there's little tips and tricks that we try to share as we come across them. And I constantly learn as I mentioned something, Shell even said, oh, here's how you do that. So it's like the more you use it, the more you kind of discover what you can and can't do with it. And we try to share that out as much as possible. For also, just to let everyone know that NICA really is embarking on a big technology survey of the technologies that they're using in an effort to find what needs to be improved or what needs to be replaced. And Pit Zone is definitely high on that list of things that they're trying to figure out how to make either work better, or do they build something new to take its place that works the way they want it to. And I think it's come a long way in terms of how they want things to be done. And that makes a big difference. So it's all in all, go through the slides. If you have questions, definitely reach out to me and I can either answer them for you or I can put you in touch with the coach supporter who put that slide together. There's some great ones on kind of mental fitness that Aaron Christian put together. There's some stuff about coaches as culture keepers and team roles, like how to work out your succession planning and that sort of thing. So Jeff Cathy and Shel Frost both did uh, presentations on that. Brian, you put together a great thing about like planning for a race weekend. Like, how do you as a coach kind of get your team deployed to handle race weekend so that all the jobs are covered, nobody's running around, and all of those things are very smooth, and the student athletes are supported in a way that's supportive without stressing them out and allowing for them to have a great race weekend experience. And then I put together a presentation on reactive agility training, which I am still refining and still adding to. But I think it's really the way that we want to start approaching training student athletes, especially those that are more enduro and downhill minded, because it is a way of training their brains to focus on just the details of a trail that they need to pay attention to and to get rid of all of the noise that they don't need to pay attention to so that they can focus in. And it also really works on making it so that the skills that we teach in OTBS 101 and 201 are automatic. They're not anything that the student athlete even has to think about how to perform correctly. They just perform it at the moment. And that was born of a little rabbit hole that I went down, looking at how downhillers train, looking at some of the tricks that they have, and really wanting to kind of pull that over into NICA because I've heard so much and I experience it on my own teams so much about student athletes kind of losing interest because of the cross country focus. And so how do we bring something in that applies to them? So all in all, I think there's some really worthwhile stuff for people to dig through, especially if you are interested in that kind of higher level coaching side of things.
Yeah, I think I really do give a lot of credit to our coach supporters for producing some engaging content, some very unique content. That's the feedback I received from a lot of the attendees so far. 8 CEUs of credit if you attended all the events. And like you said, Sean, some of those materials are available online if folks want to reference. Again, the one thing perhaps hard to replicate in a slideshow is our student athlete panel. We had Amelia, Abby, and Hamza describe what mountain biking meant to them, what their team meant to them, how it's accomplishing their goals. Some of our senior athletes, and I think it was Amelia that had the mic drop moment that, not all kids want to race, but all kids want to belong. And we're building teams and we're building communities here where all these student athletes can, achieve their goals and develop that strong mind, body, and character like we do in the league. So fantastic event with the student athlete panel for sure. Did want to mention a couple concepts and ideas we're going to try out. I think that's the other part of the training sessions for me, Sean, is just that it provide an opportunity to hear back from our coaches and our team directors. Got a lot of good ideas from them about, hey, can I get credit for this, and how do you reduce some training burden, and oh, here's how I do a race weekend. That was really, really helpful, and I promise everyone we're taking a lot of that on board to do. But one thing we're going to do this season, and we will get more information out in a communication, maybe even have Diane LeBlanc, our volunteer coordinator, on a future podcast to talk about home teams, a different way to get out volunteers for all of our race venues, which is challenging for us for any particular venue. But the idea of home teams is we're going to take our 60 plus teams from across the league, Sean, and we're going to assign 10 teams to each race event throughout the season. So those 10 teams, you serve as the home team. We'll look at you first to get your volunteers out for that race venue, your coaches, your parents, whatever. It's kind of your race to help us recruit, not even within the team, maybe even locally, with some community organizations that want to support with some volunteers. We'll do that for a period of time before we open up the volunteer spots to the entire league. And we will reward the teams that come to the table with the most volunteers this season. We'll do some end of seasons awards. We're thinking through some other incentives, like some T-shirts for our volunteers, things like that. Heck, Sean, I'll even say it in public here. Perhaps I reduce or waive team fees next season for the top 3 teams for volunteers. Yeah, I'm looking.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, really incentivize if you really bring the noise, so to speak. Let's make it worth your while. But just one of those great ideas. It might have even been John Harding. I might be attributing here, but giving coaches field credit hours for volunteering. Those are things we can consider. Just reduce some training burden. Get some volunteers out. Again, that's that dialogue at the league summit. I thought was really, really beneficial. But yeah, we'll get Diane on and we'll get more communication out. But we're going to do the home team concept for volunteers this year. Again, about 10 teams. You will be assigned a specific race for the season to focus on. So what we hear a lot, Sean, is like, oh, I want to see my kid race. It's like, okay, just we're going to ask you for one race just to be a marshal or help with parking, and then the rest of the season you can certainly watch your kid a little bit more during the race.
Absolutely. And I think Diane was even talking about reducing the lengths of time that those volunteer positions would be.
Yeah, I might even go to a 3-shift model, vice a 2-shift model to do that. Again, that's all based on feedback, Sean, why I find venues like that very beneficial. And so as we launch the home team concept, certainly looking forward to hearing some feedback from team directors or head coaches. We'll get that information out and finalize the plan for home teams. Looking into January, early February, about a month out from our first race, just so everyone knows what to expect and how to prepare for those races. And just I'll mention, one last thing about League Summit, unless we got anything else talk about. We're already thinking about next year, how we do that for next year. And I think we didn't quite have the attendance we wanted for this one, probably from timing. By and large, weekend before Thanksgiving is probably tough. We had a couple of
Well, it
series across
was
the state.
Cranksgiving, it was North Carolina Grand Prix of cyclocross. I mean, there was some big events that I would have liked to have gone to as well. So I definitely kind of understand some of the pressing matters that people were getting to.
Yeah, I'll take a better look at the calendar for next season, but we're already thinking that through. Just want to let folks know and just thinking through ways to make it easier for folks to get there. But again, for all that attended, thanks so much for getting there. Thanks for all the engagement and feedback, and looking forward to implementing some of those ideas for the upcoming season.
And also, just to, before you came on board as league director, we had started planning a league summit. And just a little bit of background on that. We were originally trying to put it in Old Fort because of the new trails, the Gateway Trail system that G5 Trail Collective and the Pisgah National Forest have put in there. And we just started running into more and more and more roadblocks with lodging and all sorts of things. And by the time we kind of figured out that it was just not going to be workable, kind of venues were booked, and we were really fortunate that Rocky Mount Mills was actually, they kind of figured out where we could fit in, and this was the date that they gave us, and so we just made it happen, so that we could have a league summit. But I think it was a great venue. It was a great league summit, and just unfortunate timing in the season and that sort of thing. So, we will endeavor to do much better for next season. One thing that need to kind of bring up on this idea of like listening to coaches and trying to reduce training burdens, and I want to preface this with, please do not shoot the messenger. Beginning next month, January, NICA is reducing the number of CEUs that are necessary to maintain the level 3 licensure from 9 to 6 every 3 years. So that CEU training burden is going down for those level 3 coaches beginning in January. So if you are looking at some CEUs that are going to be expiring in January, just take a look at the number of hours you'll have after those expire, and that'll kind of maybe put you at ease. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Again, I was just notified of this. So for those of you that have worked really hard to get your CEUs together, those 9 CEUs that were required, thank you so much for all that effort. And I really, really appreciate it. And had I known sooner, I would have let you know. So my apologies, but my thanks as well.
Those will still be some very well-trained coaches, though. So
Yes, absolutely.
good training. Yeah.
Well, I think, we talked a lot about League Summit and we talked about this home team concept, which I think is really great. But let's talk about some of the other things that we're trying to kind of get rolling this season that are outside of racing. Something that when I first came into the league way back in, I think it was 2017, we talked about how, oh, kids don't have to race. And at the time, I remember sitting there and going, cool, what else is there for them to do? And there was like, oh, there's adventure and there's Teen Trail Core, but those were never really fleshed out programs from NICA. And we were largely sort of, as a league, left to figure out how we do that on our own. And I think the pandemic kickstarted this idea of adventure a little bit more, but we've been really fortunate now with you kind of recognizing that you wanted to make this a bigger part of the league, that we've got an actual programs director with Shell Frost, and she's starting to apply that mentality that has made grit into the wonderful program that it is now in North Carolina, and is one that really like is recognized nationally throughout NICA. Like she gets lots and lots of inquiries from different grit coordinators throughout the nation about things that she does and what she does. So we're really fortunate to have her as our programs director, but I'm really excited to see what she brings to the table with trying to flesh out adventure and Teen Trail Core. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit about this Teen Trail Core initiative that we're going to be starting this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Shell has put a ton of thought and effort into both programs, and I'll just talk about adventure briefly before we talk Teen Trail Core. And adventure for this season is a season of preparation for us. How we as a league in a future season incorporate adventure programming or an adventure an event and the like. You may see some things this season at a race weekend, but I would just encourage the coaches, if they haven't already, there is an adventure module available through PitZone, 2 CUs of credit, a way to incorporate adventure program into your own team training and practices. It's a good training module. Again, probably season of preparation. Teen Trail Core, though, here it is, Sean. We're doing Teen Trail Core this season. Teams, team directors, head coaches, get out there, start counting your hours and recording your hours, because we're going to recognize you at the end of the season for the teams that get the most hours doing Teen Trail Core. We're going to recognize student athletes who achieve certain numbers of hours throughout the season and even attain the Teen Trail Corps captain designation, we will recognize those student athletes at race weekends. We will bring them up on a podium, Sean, and say they are doing a great job. They are investing in our trail system. We can't do this riding without the trail systems that we all enjoy here. And so we will do Teen Trail Corps this season. More details to follow. I think we should bring Shell on a future podcast to talk the implementation of some of these things. And I'll just say again, thank you. We had Austin on the podcast last go around from Cognitive MTB. They're investing in this program so we can do these things and provide some recognition to our teams and to our student athletes who are really spending some time out on the trails. But yeah, just mark it, Sean. We're doing Teen Trail Corps in the North Carolina Interscholastic Cycling League for 2023. Got to do it.
Awesome. And I think, you know, one of the things that I think is really going to work well with this having, you know, a sponsor that really believes in what it is that we're doing, that is that not just that outside support, but it's that outside accountability. Like we've got someone outside of NICA, outside of the North Carolina League, who is looking for us to be taking a leadership role in this Teen Trail Corps idea. So I think that's going to be really, really good. And like, I mean, I've met Austin a couple of times. The first time I ever met him was at Canuga, and you know, just a great guy, always stoked, really living his best life. And I think the fact that he's willing to spread, you know, his financial support with things like Teen Trail Corps and all the other ways that he does that, uh, giving money back to trails in his area. I think that's really awesome. So really honored to have him, you know, see the potential of what we do with Teen Trail Corps.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about, just at our race venues, how can we be better stewards of the environment, better stewards of the resources we have, recycling the race tape and all those type of things. I think is just a culture thing for us to think through. And let me bring it back to adventure just real quickly to show how these programs are related. Oftentimes, a team could set an adventure event, if you will, by just taking the team out and identifying places on the trails that need repair or an aspect of the trail that might be able to change and report that to the local land manager. That might be the adventure, just to figure out what needs to happen on the trail, and you get some Teen Trail Corps credit hours for that. They're related in some sense. So don't limit yourselves. It takes some creativity sometimes. I may not be the guy to do it. Thank goodness we have Shell, the programs manager. Again, she comes up with Space Chicken. So,
Yep.
we'll probably see Space Chicken on a Teen Trail Corps activity at some point. But yeah, I think those two programs can absolutely be related together. And yeah, looking forward to implementing some of these things.
And just a reminder to head coaches and team directors, you can record the Teen Trail Corps hours for your student athletes and your coaches in PitZone yourself. So there's no need to email them to anybody, anything like that. There's no points of friction. Like you just do it directly and that goes in and we see a record of that. We've got all that by team and by student athlete. So that's really good to kind of get in that habit. And you might even want to find that coach on your team who's just really into trail building and say, hey, can you start taking care of this for us? Can you keep track of our Teen Trail Corps hours? That's something that you can also do in Team Snap. Like if you want to have a spreadsheet that you're putting all that stuff in, or if you want to use those tracked items. So if you do a trail maintenance event, like put that in the tracked items, and then you can just check off everybody that attended. And then that way, like these people were at this trail day, we worked for this number of hours, put all that into the PitZone and you're done. So whatever you can do to sort of leverage that record keeping, but make it to where all of your hours are getting recorded is really good.
Yeah, and I think it was Lars at League Summit who recommended the idea of some form of dashboard so all the teams know how they're doing compared to the other teams in the leagues. And we'll take that for action best we can. But Sean, why don't we just for upcoming podcasts, we'll just announce the hours. Here's the top three teams with their number of hours for Team
Yeah,
Trail. We'll let everyone
absolutely.
know.
We
Yeah,
can certainly do that.
absolutely. That sounds good.
Awesome. Well, I want to talk a little bit about there's going to be a little bit of a schedule change. So previously we were doing the coaches conversation email was coming out on the third Thursday of the month. and the coaches call was the third Monday of the month. And a lot of times there was some overlap, and there was some overlap with some single track times. And so as a way of not hitting your inbox all at the same time, we're going to move the coaches conversation email is going to come out the second Monday of the month. So podcast comes out the first Monday, coaches conversation email comes out the second Monday, and the coaches call will be the third Monday. If you are a coach and you're listening to this, you are welcome to join that coaches call. That invitation goes out to everybody. It is not exclusive for head coaches or team directors. So by all means, come and contribute to the conversation. Also, ask questions. It's a great forum for asking a question and then having someone there who can answer it. That may be me, that may be someone else, but definitely encourage you to take part in that because it's a great opportunity to have two-way conversation. All right. I think we're down to the very last part of the podcast. So
This is probably what everyone's been waiting for. That's what.
probably. And that's why we leave it to the end, because you got to get through all that other stuff to get to this. So,
Right.
Brian, you're locked and loaded because I sprung it on you, and then from that point forward, I was never going to get the jump on you again. So hit me with your dad joke.
Yeah, I couldn't escape the space theme from yesterday's Out of This World grid event. So here we go, Sean. How do astronauts organize a party in space?
How do astronauts organize a party in space? I do not know.
They plan it. From the guy who did the race weekend planning. Of course, it had to be
So
planning.
I stuck with the space theme as well. I was inspired, even though I wasn't in costume. Uh, how does the moon cut his hair?
Oh, quarter moon, waning moon. I don't know. Waxing moon. Waxing. No, I don't know. So,
Eclipse it.
yes. Yep. Awesome. I'll give us both kudos for sticking with the space theme. Shell, this one's for you.
This one is for
Bad
Shell.
jokes are for you.
Well, Brian, until I don't know, until the next time we talk, which I'm sure is going to be 5 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Best
Because it
work of the
seems
day.
like Monday is always the day and 5 o'clock is the time. But yeah, it's great having you. Thanks for joining me again for the podcast, and we'll do this again in a month.
Sounds good. All right, Sean.
All right.
Out.